Welcome to Reddit Aliens. Serious, what is an urban legend from your area that turned out to be true? Not safe for work. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Serial murderer was picking off indigenous women from the crime-ridden area of the city, downtown East Side Vancouver, and having their remains disposed of at a pig farm in another suburb. Robert William Willie Picton. Not totally true, but there was a house in the neighborhood all the kids called the murder house. Usual mean old man stories. If you go on his lawn, he'll drag you to his basement and murder you. Turns out, he was a sex offender with a pretty serious rap, and the parents encouraged the story as it made the kids stay away without having to talk about pedophilia. I used to live in a very small town in West Virginia, and there was a local story going around about a giant turkey. Some hunter swore he saw a turkey that stood 5 feet tall, and it had talons that could easily kill a man. So that was the local rumor for a while. There's a giant turkey out there somewhere. Some said he was crazy. Others said they saw it too. All kinds of stories going around. Turns out it was an emu. Somebody else saw the thing, and they knew what an emu is. Some people who raise goats and chickens keep an emu with their herd. Emus are territorial and protective of what they perceive to be their group, so they run off predators like foxes and coyotes, and people, for that matter. Most likely it escaped, and nobody claimed it for some reason. The Catman of Greenock, Scottish town 30 minutes from Glasgow where I grew up. Kids would all bullshit about a terrifying sounding cryptid. A bearded man with a pitch-black skin who prowled around at midnight catching rats and chasing kids who had ventured into some disused underground freight tunnels. Part of a coming-of-age ritual loads of us went through. It was all bravado and made up stories, and the only people who I ever heard claim to have seen him were kids that were ages with me and from a part of town I wasn't too local to, so it seemed like a big in-joke between some classmates that had spread. In my late teens, I met my now wife and eventually met her brother-in-law, who was about 10 years older than us, so approaching 30. I couldn't believe it when he brought up the Catman and swore he'd seen him one night when he himself was a teenager and was terrified. I still thought it was all a long con. Then came the camera phones, and what do you know? Plenty of photographs of him taken by intrepid nighttime adventurers who coaxed him out with cartons of chips and cans of iron brew, most of which are taken at or around the exact bus depot the brother-in-law saw him all that time ago. The alleged origin of Catman as an AWOL Russian sailor are totally unconfirmed. Rumors are he died during lockdown. The Green Man. Apparently, he was a really sweet, misunderstood man who was horribly disfigured when he was a kid. He was fond of taking nighttime walks. The pictures of him can give you an idea of why he could be frightening. I've been reading for a while with this channel now, and I've read about the Green Man a few times, but I've never read it and not thought about Charlie Day from It's Always Sunny. How about you? There was a leader of the local church youth group who also was an amateur photographer. Some kid in my class didn't like him and started a rumor that he was a pedophile. It got so big that his parents called for an investigation by the school, and they found that he actually was sexually abusing his kids. It wasn't a specific urban legend about my hometown so much as a general urban legend. The legend is derived from late medieval legends where people journeying through a forest and find a forgotten village the forest grew up around. The only surviving building is a stone church where the last of the villagers gathered before the Black Plague wiped them out 100 years earlier. The travelers find their skeletons still seated around the altar. In the case of my town, we're surrounded by steep, high hills. Hikers found a car that ran off the road with a woman's skeleton in the driver's seat. She was reported missing in the 1970s, but with her car gone and no internet or cell phones, authorities concluded she got simply driven away. Which she kind of did, but she ran off the road, crashed in the deep underbrush, and nobody found her till years later. There are similar stories in other places, but mostly cars that crashed into ponds and came out looking like what a car submerged for 20 plus years looks like. Her car and her personal effects were mostly intact, basically a 1970s time capsule. That one of my neighbors was a pedophile, so in my neighborhood the older kids always said the guy was creepy or liked kids. There were several days when he gave everyone ice cream. He drove a tractor trailer for a major ice cream company. A few years later, we got home from school and there were all sorts of FBI or police vehicles outside of his house. Turns out he'd been busted in an FBI sting. Was he busted for being a pedophile or being an ice cream thief? I was just looking for some context. Either way, not good. Where I grew up, there was a scary old house from either the 50s or 60s across from the church. It was burned, covered in ivy, and didn't match the giant apartments surrounding it. To access one of the elementary schools and one of the middle schools in the area, you'd have to walk past this scary-ass house, and you'd see kids avoiding that side of the street simply because they were so scared of the house. Drug addicts wouldn't even camp there. Homeless people wouldn't take shelter in it even during hurricanes. The rumor was that the house had an entire family get butchered by an insane asylum escapee, and that the house had been abandoned since. This was supported by the fact that the middle school I mentioned used to be a hospital many claimed was for mental health. Well, in 2012, that house was bought and eventually torn down to build luxury apartments, but no work has ever been done. It's now an eerie plot of land. So I decided to do some research, and turned out the schoolyard stories were sort of true. The house was owned by a family who rented out some of the rooms while still living there. The teenaged daughter, Lillian Mojica, was raped and murdered in the basement by one of the tenants. That my hometown had its own monk. People were apparently seeing a Buddhist monk around town, which would be incredibly unusual where I'm from. It was true though. His name was Paul, and he had converted and completely dedicated his life to Buddhism. Very nice man. I was driving down a West Virginia back road in the middle of the night when I came around a curve to an injured dog standing in the middle of the road. I slammed on my brakes and missed him by a hair. I got out to find him because he was limping real bad, and I was hoping he'd have a collar. He vanished into thin air. Like 6 months later, I was going down the YouTube rabbit hole and watched a video about the most haunted places in West Virginia, and they talked about this road that is haunted by a ghost of a limping dog that lures people into the night. Same effing road. They said the route name, and I almost threw my laptop across the room. I'm not superstitious, but now I'm a little stitious. Had a family that lived down the street from me when I was younger. The family didn't really integrate well with the neighborhood, and kids my age were pretty strange, but I would still associate with them from time to time. Well, the family had a reputation as being peeping Toms, and I had heard about that the mom and kids would hide and look through people's windows. Not sure if it fully classified as an urban legend, but it sounded a bit too far-fetched. Well, then came the day I was riding my bike through the neighborhood, and one teenage boy, probably 18 or so at the time, was hanging out in their garage with girls, and they appeared to be flirting, etc. Not that I paid close attention, and it was more peripherally way of that. But in the bushes, in this person's yard, I saw a member of the family that was a bit strange walk out of the bushes. Kid was close to my age, and I was halfway through the comment, "Oh, I should have known you would be spying," kind of joking, but referencing this rumor of peeping. And halfway through this coming out of my mouth, the mom steps out of the bushes, binoculars around the neck, and I'm just floored. They were totally peeping Toms. They were on this other person's property in the bushes, actively watching the action in the garage. I wasn't even teenaged at the time, but wow, I was floored. I didn't wait for a response, I didn't wait for anything else, and I pedaled my little butt off until I got home. But that was the day my perception of the oddities of humans became a little more real. TL, DR, family had a reputation of being peeping Toms. Turned out they were all the way up, and including mom. When I was a kid, there was a road that ended in a T, but at the intersection, if you drove straight, you'd go down a steep gravel dirt slope. There was a small dirt landing and then water. It was used by locals to launch canoes and small boats into a very large river. Later, the city put up a bended sheet metal railing barrier. One simple rail. It just always was closed, except to kids. In like grade 6, I saw the barrier was blown through, and we all talked and all the kids said there was a car in the water. Kids didn't play there as much, as someone was dead in the water. Everybody knew. Barrier was fixed, nothing came about it for years. When I was like 19, they were shocked to report that a car and remains were found there. But the big question the media had was, how did the car crash into the water when the barrier was unaffected? Thought to myself after all this time, nobody asked us kids. There was a giant mansion at the top of a hill near our place that everyone claimed was where the Freemasons sent their old crazy people to die so that their secrets couldn't get out. Allegedly, there were wild animals all over the place, and it was dangerous to try to go there. Place used to terrify me. Yeah, it was the Masonic retirement home. It has a nature park inside of it. It's in Union City, California. Diaper Man. Everyone in elementary school said not to go into the woods because Diaper Man was back there. A kid even claimed he saw Diaper Man, and we thought he was full of shit. Many years later, upon a visit back home, I met up with some old friends, and we decided to go have a smoke in the woods. We first noticed there were adult diapers tossed into the woods about 5 to 10 feet off the trail, lots of them. Then, we look up in the distance. Yep, a full-grown adult man in an adult diaper, Diaper Man. As soon as he saw us, he ran. This was about 20 years ago. I recently visited family again, went for a jog in those woods. There were adult diapers everywhere, and there again was Diaper Man, this time as a fit adult on the run. I chased after him. He's a mentally handicapped man who lives in a halfway home in the adjacent neighborhood. I guess he has been going into the woods to get rid of his diapers for like 40 plus years. There were rumors of an inbred mutant enclave in the woods north of New York City in the Hudson Valley that dare takers would take a drive up to. The mutant part isn't real, and the inbred part is questionable, but the Onion Town is very much real and documented. My friend lived in central New Jersey and used to tell us about the prison farm where inmates were used for hard labor, and the cows had plexiglass windows bolted to their sides so you could see them digest their food. Turns out it's all true. In my hometown, there was an old bridge built in the 20s. It was smallish, just going over a small stream between where two small towns meet. There was a rumor that there was a treasure dropped into the cement when it was wet. There was also a rumor several builders fell into the cement and died during the construction. There was also a rumor that a dead body was thrown into it by the mob. They demolished the bridge a few years back, finding 2 skeletons and a briefcase of money, I think a few $1,000s. If I remember correctly, the 2 skeletons were from workers on the bridge, something that was reported and archived in a newspaper back in the 1920s, and anyone could have actually researched if they wanted to. I have no idea how the briefcase of money got in there, and I don't think anyone ever came up with an answer for it. I guess less so an urban legend and more so a rumor. When I was in 6th grade, some kids made a joke that the choir teacher, who taught at both middle and high school, beat his wife, and it spread like wildfire, even though everyone knew it wasn't true. I mean, it couldn't have possibly been true. He was a scraggly man in his early 30s with a daughter that is constantly sick due to her chemotherapy, since she was diagnosed with leukemia when I was in like 8th grade. He was always gone every once in a while with trips to the Mayo and the cities for her treatment. He was a very nice man that couldn't possibly hurt a fly. This all changed, however, when just 2 years ago in my freshman year of high school, he got arrested for reportedly assaulting his pregnant wife and 7-year-old daughter. He was arrested, and at his trial he pled guilty, but his case was dropped due to COVID. He was never fired, and still works as the choir director. To this day, I find him a very creepy man. He still talks about his wife and daughter, but it's clear that everyone knows exactly who he is. At this point, our entire high school choir is about 5 people big. For a school of 2,200 students, just because people can't stand being within 10 feet of him. The rumor was there was a local homeless, mentally unwell person that was actually quite rich and owned a mansion. Turns out there was some truth to that. Once his issues became apparent, his mother set out with a plan and largely worked herself to death to buy a house and set up a bunch of trusts and cares for him and basically train him to look after him. Thing is, his mother apparently never really considered what he would actually do all day, never set him up with a role or job. He wore scruffy clothes because he liked those clothes and was always hanging around the market square because the library was there and the market traders were always friendly and chatty. We learned all this when one of my friends was hired on as a carer. She got him a role at a library and got him a small part-time job at a charity shop, both of which he seemed to deeply enjoy. Local corrupt mob lawyer's wife disappeared. Rumors swirled that she either ran off with a lover or he had her killed, possibly by the town's mob-connected police chief, but with no evidence to the rumors. A few years later, the wife's car is found in a canal with her body in the trunk, with a crushed skull and shot. The chief and lawyer went to prison on conspiracy to murder charges. The story was later made into a TV movie called Deadly Matrimony. Not exactly like the rumors, but fitting. There were rumors of occult devil-worshipping type ceremonies happening in the woods outside of my buddy's smallish Midwestern town. They were supposedly pretty elaborate and involved a lot of people. Turns out, it was really elaborate KKK gatherings with robes, burning cross-like structures. The whole stereotypical movie scene based on the South in the 50s, but this was like 2010. Turned out, some of the members were high-ranking school administrators and municipal board members. The rumors were created as a red herring by the KKK members due to traces of their ceremonies being found. The only reason I know about this story is because my buddies discovered a ceremony and realized it was actually colorful KKK robes. There was a story about a doctor who just burned up one day for no reason, a couple of towns over. My mom has an unsolved mysteries book, and I was shocked to actually happen upon the story in it. If I remember correctly, his charred remains were found in his bathroom at home, but nothing else around him had been burned except for maybe the floor directly beneath him. I'll have to look it up as it's been years since I last did. For decades, there were rumors about a big cave under a local high school where kids would go down and skip class and smoke pot. Well, in 2011, they discovered water runoff caverns under the same school, so the kids weren't lying. Nothing weird really, because my state is known for having a lot of caves, but yeah, kinda ruined everyone's hangout spot, LMAO. Sounds like the rumor was started by some kids that wanted to keep their hangout private. Did you guys have one of those spots in high school? I did. Rumor was that dead rats and squirrels were showing up around the school field with bullet holes in them. The school dismissed it as stupid kids drumming up drama. A few months later, police picked up a homeless person who had made a hidden camp behind a nearby Burger King, who had made a habit of shooting small animals at night, often on the elementary school grounds. We had an abandoned factory in our town that had a lot of haunted rumors and the like. We called it the Pickle Factory. One of the rumors was about a boy dying in the elevator shaft, and it was kinda supported by the fact the elevator shaft was bricked up, and clearly more recently than the abandonment. Naturally, that meant we would climb the elevator shaft when we heard the other kids were headed there and pretended to be the ghost. One day, cops showed up, and I managed to slam a door on one and escape before they saw me. When I got older, I learned two things. Apparently, that cop never went there for a call again, and the kid dying was real. We were lucky not to die ourselves. There is a housing complex in Budapest called the Havana Housing Complex. It always had a reputation of being a shady place where crime is much more common than anywhere else. Anyways, there was a legend that at some point some residents took a horse up to the 8th floor, cut it down in a bathtub, and made all sorts of meals out of it. I got to know a guy who could confirm. He lived a few floors below. I lived in South Carolina for a bit, and there was a large old tree with short, uneven branches. I paid no mind to it until I looked closer at the tree. There were deep knife markings going up and down the bark, and even into the trunk. I talked with some people, and we joked how it used to be a hanging tree, and that rumor became pretty widespread. It turns out to be true, and the spot where the tree was grown used to be a slave lot 350 years ago, and some markings higher up were actually worn out tally marks. The branches must have broke after so much usage. I left a year after I found that out. Wasn't very comfortable after that discovery, and I didn't feel welcomed in South Carolina because of my heritage, so I went back to people I knew.